Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this beautiful morning to our industry brief and webinar, where we're absolutely excited to present to you the Industrial Decarbonisation Initiative, where we're offering a combined $80 million of new grant programs spread across two really important programs as part of our Net Zero Industrial Initiative: the $40 million Low Emissions Industry Program, and also the $40 million Renewable Gas Production Program. I'm your host, Eric Kimmel, and today I'm joined by my colleagues, Brigitte, Richard, and Casey, which I will be introducing very shortly here. This Industrial Decarbonisation Initiative and the new grant streams that are housed under that initiative are new, but what remains a really constant theme in all the work that we do and all our legacy grant programs as well is that as best that we can, we want to support industry decarbonize, and while also strengthening businesses, enhance their resiliency, particularly in a continuously evolving environment where energy security and sovereign manufacturing are certainly paramount and front and center for many policymakers, not only in Australia, but around the world, and also to many of our domestic industries in Australia and many of our viewers here today. So before I get started and kick things off, I certainly would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we're all gathered across the country today. I'm speaking live from Parramatta Square. We're on the lands of the Barramattagal people of the Darug Nations, and certainly we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And certainly I would like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples with us here in attendance today. So I just want to introduce to the speakers that will be involved in this webinar this morning. We have Brigitte LG, which is a project officer in our team. We have Richard Naughton, another project officer in our team, and Casey Williams as well, another project officer. Brigitte will give us an overview of the Industrial Decarbonisation Initiative. Richard will then provide a bit of an overview and unpack the details of our Low Emissions Industry Program Initiative. And then Casey will provide a bit of an overview of our Renewable Gas Production Program grant and unpack some of the details and the features associated with that particular offer. And so, folks, the agenda here today is pretty simple. Obviously, we'll discuss the new grant offerings. We'll answer some of the pre-submitted questions that you all kindly submitted when you registered. And finally, we will be fielding some live questions. So anything that pops to your head, you have a question that needs to be addressed, please feel free to sort of pop that in to today's Slido, and I'll go over that in a moment. And then I'll wrap things up and give you a bit of tips for success, given that we've been running these grant programs now for the latter part of 2 to 3 years. So certainly we have a lot of tips to offer as well. So before we start, I'll get a bit of the housekeeping out of the way. Please note that live captions are available and Auslan interpreters are provided throughout the session. The session will be recorded, and the recorded session will be put on our Industrial Decarbonisation Initiative website. A link will be found throughout this recording. And at the end, as I noted earlier, we'll have a session answering some pre-submitted questions as well as some live questions that pop up as we proceed with the webinar. And for questions that don't get answered, don't worry about it. We'll review them. And the ones that really warrant that attention, we'll update our frequently answered question page as needed. So if you'd like to ask questions here today, we have a Slido Q&A, post answers that we can you can post some questions, we can post some answers as well, and we could verbally address those questions as well throughout the entire session. If you're using a laptop, desktop, you can type the questions directly into the chat. But if you're dialing in via phone or a meeting room, please use number 402-9568, 402-9568, or just follow the big QR code in front of your screen. So I'll give you just a few moments to access those to get you going for those of you that are interested in participating, and I certainly encourage all of you to participate. And if, very importantly, if you have confidential questions or very specific questions related to a project, obviously nuance and context matters to these particular projects, you should email them directly to our mailbox, which is emissionsreduction@environment.nsw.gov.au. Again, emissionsreduction@environment.nsw.gov.au. And we'll respond to those directly. And so hopefully all of you have had a moment to access the Slido. So on that note, I'll invite my colleague Brigitte to the lectern to take you through some of the features of our new Industrial Decarbonization Initiative. Thank you. Brigitte.
Thank you, Eric. The Industrial Decarbonisation Initiative co-funds diverse emission reduction projects. Our goal is to help New South Wales industry reduce their emissions and remain competitive in the transition to net zero. Under this initiative, we're expanding opportunities to support more organizations and facilities to help drive greater industrial emissions and reductions across the state. The initiative recently launched 2 new grants. I'm very excited to introduce the $40 million Low Emission Industry Program to support the manufacturing and mining facilities that emit up to 100,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents per year to implement emission reduction projects before June of 2030. This offer targets a new segment of the market for National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Scheme, or NGER, facilities that were previously underserved. So we are pleased to be able to release an offer that targets a few hundred facilities that were not covered under the former High Emitting Industries grants. Another amazing offer that we announced at the Renewable Fuels Week is the $40 million Renewable Gas Production Program. This program supports the new commercially mature front-of-the-meter biomethane production facilities. This grant delivers an action under the renewable fuel schemes to expand production of renewable gas in the New South Wales economy and to help our industrial business decarbonise. This grant offers capital support and complements the evolving renewable gas policy landscape. The Industrial Decarbonisation Initiative still houses the now closed High Emitting Industries grant, which is currently under redevelopment. We will also house any future grant opportunities under this initiative. We will keep you in the loop of any progress in this field. Next, Richard will discuss the Low Emissions Industry Program.
Thank you, Brigitte. So the $40 million Low Emissions Industry Program will co-fund emissions reduction projects at manufacturing and mining facilities that emit up to 100,000 tons of CO2 per year. Businesses can apply for between $500,000 and $10 million to cover up to 50% of the eligible costs. These costs include funding associated with design, procurement, construction, and commissioning. This program is not designed to support feasibility studies. To be eligible, you must be a mining or manufacturing facility based in New South Wales. You must have reported under the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting NGER scheme for 2024-25 financial year, and you must not be a safeguard facility. An eligible project must abate at least 1,000 tons of CO2 equivalent per year and must be fully operational by 30 June 2030. Types of projects can include fuel switching, boiler upgrades, waste heat recovery, heat pump installations and facility retrofits. If you do not meet any of the eligibility requirements, unfortunately, you will not be eligible to apply for the grant. For a full list of the eligibility requirements, please review the funding guidelines before applying. This can be found on the Industrial Decarbonisation Initiative website. So some anticipated timelines. So from the application to project start, we can see on the screen as follows. So as shown, the applications opened a few weeks ago and will close at 11 p.m. on the 9th of June, 2026. The assessment period will be from July to November 2026, with notification of the outcomes with a letter of offer any time from November 2026 onwards. We expect an executed funding deed and the commencement of the project from 2 to 6 months after the letter of offer. So we use the following merit criteria to assess applications, which can also be found in greater detail within the funding guidelines. We are looking for projects that give us the greatest emissions reductions at the lowest cost to government, with proven capability for delivery with demonstrated technology. Projects should also have positive contributions to the New South Wales economy, and organisations should be open to sharing best practice knowledge to reduce implementation barriers across the sector. Remember, before submitting any application, please check the funding guidelines for a full overview of what is required for each merit and eligibility criteria. Next, Casey will discuss the renewable gas production programme.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everyone. The Renewable Gas Production Program. So this grant actions a core policy highlighted in the recently released Renewable Fuel Strategy, offering capital support to de-risk biomethane production projects in New South Wales. Along with Green Power's Renewable Gas Guarantee of Origin certificates, we're really excited to share that we now have all the mechanisms in place to develop the market for biomethane in New South Wales. So the $40 million renewable gas production program supports new, commercially mature, front-of-the-meter production facilities. These facilities will be vital to decarbonise New South Wales industry and accelerate the state's transition to renewable energy, as outlined in the Renewable Fuel Strategy. Businesses are invited to submit an expression of interest, and if invited to the full application stage, can apply for up to $20 million to cover up to 50% of eligible project costs. Funding can support design, procurement, construction, and commissioning. It can't support feasibility studies. To be eligible, a business must plan to own or have operational control over a biomethane production plant in New South Wales, to produce and supply biomethane into the New South Wales gas network at a minimum rate of 0.1 petajoules per year by June 2030. They must also have agreements with New South Wales feedstock suppliers for biomethane production, New South Wales gas network owners and operators to enable injection into the gas pipeline, and an industrial off-taker in New South Wales that will use the biomethane. They must also intend to participate in Green Power's renewable gas certification to create and sell renewable gas guarantee of origin certificates for the produced biomethane. For a full list of eligibility requirements, please review the funding guidelines on the IDI website before applying. But you're not on your own. It's the first of its kind biomethane grant, so please come and talk to us if you have any questions. We're here to help. Having a look at the timeline, the anticipated expression of interest and full applications are on the screen now. The expression of interest stage is open until the 11 p.m, Friday the 24th of April, 2026, with assessment running until 27th of June this year as well, and invitations to the full application stage in July this year. Full application stage closes in September this year, with assessments lasting up to January 2027. Funding deed negotiations are expected to take place from February 2027 onwards. So we're looking for projects that have the largest biomethane production capacity by June 2030. Scale is paramount to us, and we're looking for the lowest cost to government, with demonstrated proof of technology providing a clear pathway for the required approvals. You must demonstrate your capacity and capability to undertake the project on time and within budget, and should provide evidence of any agreements or preliminary discussions with supply chain partners. This includes feedstock suppliers, gas distribution owners, and industrial off-takers. The full application stage will only consider projects that have evidence of agreements in place. You'll need to provide the project's impact on job creation and alignment with New South Wales government priorities, such as how you will accelerate the development of the renewable fuel industry in New South Wales. And finally, you'll need to provide a knowledge sharing plan that outlines what knowledge from the project will be shared, how and when it will be shared, who it will be shared with, and what the value of the knowledge will be. I'll now hand back to Eric to moderate the Q&A.
Well, thank you so much, Brigitte, Richard, Casey. Thanks a lot for taking us through a very thorough and detailed overview of the new initiatives under our Industrial Decarbonisation Initiative. There's a lot of ground that they covered, and certainly I'm seeing the Slido board pop up with a lot of questions, which is very encouraging. I see that my team back in the green room are answering a lot of those, so that's great. It relieves a bit of pressure from us. But I do want to go over a couple of the questions that you submitted when you registered, and then we'll field some of these live questions. So there's a couple of pretty good ones that were submitted that come up regularly. The first one is a couple of things around the low emissions industry program. Brigitte, we've heard from some facilities and companies in New South Wales that have multiple projects and multiple sites. Can these companies put in multiple applications?
Yeah, if you have multiple projects, you can definitely put in multiple applications. This is for both the low emissions industry program and the renewable gas production program. But both programs are competitive and applications are assessed competitively. So we recommend that you put in your strongest applications.
Right. Thanks, Brigitte. Yeah. So if you submit multiple applications, they'll be assessed competitively against each other. So yeah, please put in or put forward your strongest application. That's good advice, Brigitte. Thank you. Also, applicants that receive funding. So could applicants that, if they put their applications together, could they receive funding for separate applications, or how will that work, essentially?
So unfortunately, you can't use funding to develop applications.
Oh, okay.
At this stage. We also can't fund feasibility studies for the low emission industry program or for the renewable gas production program. We are looking for good projects at this stage that are ready to help reduce emissions in New South Wales.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So yeah, unfortunately, we don't support pre-deployment activities. We certainly do support engineering design, front-end engineering design, those kind of studies, those kind of pre-deployment activities. But regrettably, we don't support funding, or we don't provide funding for applications or pre-feas or feasibility studies. It's good to know. Thank you. A couple of other things. This is what I've been hearing as well. I've been saying on a variety of different circuits over the last 2 years, companies need to get investment ready. And the reason that they need to get investment ready is that you never know when grant programs and offers are going to go out to the market. And sometimes they don't perfectly align with a corporation's or a business's capital budgeting process, or sometimes they don't have the appropriate sort of pre-deployment work or project development work like pre-fees or feasibility studies to get that FID. And certainly we understand that these programs don't necessarily align perfectly with business cycles. But unfortunately, we don't kind of, support that. But if there is a conversation that needs to be had, that you need some support in pre-deployment work, please reach out to our inbox, and we're happy to have that conversation with you. But regrettably, these programs don't support it. Okay, moving to project types. Are fuel switching projects like moving from diesel to natural gas or coal to biochar eligible, which are, front and center? These kind of questions we're getting a lot, particularly given the current economic environment. So in terms of these kind of projects, Brigitte, what's your take on it?
I think,
or Richard.
Yeah, I can field that one. So we do want to see projects that are aligned with a credible decarbonisation pathway. So for your facility or for the sector in general. So if it's electrification or on-site behind-the-meter biomethane, they're also eligible to apply for funding. But projects like biochar and off-site biogas, maybe if it's sort of located nearby, they may also be eligible if there's an overall emissions reduction, both at the facility and including any of the additional facilities required to support the project. So I think we'll provide a bit more of a detailed response to that in the FAQs, which will be on the website about that.
Great, thanks for that. And so, that's really important. And particularly biochar, we've been fielding some questions and some queries around biochar and that proximity in terms of, does it have to be on the site? Could we be a bit detached? And there's a lot of nuance, again, a lot of context with these types of questions, with these type of projects. So best to reach out to us directly, and we could have that conversation and kind of scope out the specifications of your individual projects. So on that note, just to follow up, obviously the Low Emissions Industry Program can fund projects that reduce both Scope 1 and 2 emissions. And so what's your take on that? I mean, obviously our priority is Scope 1, but can we entertain projects that reduce Scope 2 emissions as well? Yeah,
so we definitely entertain, we have a preference for Scope 1, but we do also entertain sort of Scope 2 projects. And if you do submit an application which has got a Scope 1 reduction focus, they will tend to be scored higher in the assessment process. Scope 2 projects, on the other hand, will be most competitive when they're sort of part of a broader strategy to reduce or to eliminate sort of direct industrial emissions. So we accept both. We have a preference for Scope 1.
Great, thank you. And again, if you have any specific questions regarding a specific project, please reach out to us as well. Okay, moving on to the renewable gas production program grants. And so obviously applicants can claim revenues from a variety of different streams. ACCUs comes to mind, safeguard mechanism credits, SMCs, for safeguard exposed facilities, RGGOs, et cetera, et cetera. And so give us your sense in terms of, if a project has multiple revenue streams, how are those going to be sort of looked at by the assessment panel as part of a project when assessing the project economics and the financial feasibility of a given project?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Applicants can claim revenues from ACCUs, safeguard mechanism credits, RGGOs, no problem, but we'll need to demonstrate the need for New South Wales government funding. So that's key for us, and you must include all your revenues in the financial analysis. So based on that financial analysis and the financial viability of the project, the assessment panel will decide whether co-funding is required and how much. And specifically, we're looking for, does it enable a financial investment decision? Does it shorten the implementation timeframe? Does it increase the scale or allow for plans to increase scale in the future?
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Casey. And obviously, I mean, the merit criteria is pretty clear. The eligibility criteria is pretty clear in the RGPP, the Renewable Gas Production Program. But one thing that we do want to underscore is scale is paramount. Obviously the minimum threshold for eligibility is 0.1 petajoules, but the larger the volume that a scheme can produce, those are the ones that are really going to get stacked up high. And obviously, the ability to deliver by 2030 is certainly something that we'll be looking for as well.
Absolutely.
So something to keep in mind. So thank you for all those. And so those are a couple of the pre-submitted questions that you all provided when you register. So I'm looking at the chat board here, and it's going off. And the staff in the green room in the back are doing a really good job at answering. So they're relieving a lot of the pressure for us. There's a one that perhaps I could talk about here. Here's a good one. Look, this is a common question that we always get from proponents for grant programs. It's one of the unintended consequences of grant programs run by governments. The approval processes can be slow. We agree. Certainly, that's uncontestable. Oop, I just lost it because it's going so quick. I just lost it. And so, okay. So is there something that an applicant or a proponent can do to kind of help us speed up the process? Is there any tips that we could provide a proponent, given that there's kind of structural constraints, approval processes can be slow? What could a proponent do to help us kind of speed the approval process along?
I can take that one. I think that, your funding guidelines are your best friend. Have a look what we need to see. Have all your information ready. If uploading documents is optional, upload those documents, give us as much information as possible. That just makes us able to assess more easily and not have to go back to the proponent to request more information, which just causes a delay.
No, that's really good advice, Brigitte. So the key point here is to underscore is more is better. We need an exhaustive list of evidence. We understand that. But it's just part of our due diligence process. And the more information that you provide us, the more quality an application is, the quicker that our assessment panel will be in a position to confidently make a decision on it with a shortened time frame. So I think that's a really good point, Brigitte. Thank you so much for that. A quick question on the renewable gas production program grant. This is a good one. When do the applicants, Casey, need to provide evidence of off-taker agreements?
So we require evidence at the full application stage. So if your expression of interest is successful and you're invited to that stage, that'll be in July. So that's where we'll require evidence of those agreements. And they can be memorandums of understanding, letters of commercial intent, binding gas purchase agreements. So not until the full application stage in July. But as Brigitte mentioned, the sooner you can provide us with any evidences at the expression of interest stage in particular, the easier our job at assessment is.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Casey. That's really, and in the funding guidelines as well, folks, it's very explicit in terms of what we require and the type of strategic partnerships we're looking at. Certainly what is paramount with this particular grant is industrial offtake. We want to use that low carbon molecule to offset the gas being used right now by our industrial facilities. And certainly that is our objective with this. It's not only building a biomethane market here in the state. My Canadiana just popped out there. But it's also to help our industrial businesses offset their consumption of fossil-based natural gas as well. So keep that in mind. Thank you, Casey. Yeah. Appreciate it. And so, oh, wow, this is interesting. This is a tough one. I don't think we have an answer for this. We'll probably get back to the audience on this one. Would you classify desalination plants and or logistics hubs as manufacturing projects? Wow, that's an interesting one. Desalination plants. Probably not for a manufacturing facility. Probably wouldn't.
I think it would need to meet the eligibility threshold. So whether it's a mining or manufacturing ANZIT code, whether the actual project that you might be doing actually reduces emissions by over 1,000 tons, or at least 1,000 tons. For that question, I would definitely go through the funding guidelines, go through the eligibility criteria. If you don't meet just one of those eligibility criteria, unfortunately, you probably won't be eligible. But sounds interesting.
Yeah, I had no idea that we even had desalinization plants in New South Wales. So thank you for sort of enlightening us this morning. So that's good advice. Thank you, Rich. Okay, we've got another one here. This is for the RGPP one as well, the Renew Gas Production Program. Does 100% of biomethane output need to be contracted with a New South Wales industrial partner in order to be eligible? Is there a minimum threshold of a contracted value?
The minimum threshold of contracted value.
It's a tough one.
We can come back to that part of the question. So we'll circle back to that one. Apologies. But it does need to be an industrial off-taker in New South Wales. So that part is correct. And what we mean by an industrial off-taker is an ENGA reporting facility. So you need to demonstrate that you're lowering their emissions.
Yeah. And just to add to that, so we'll get back to you on that one. But certainly, as Casey alluded to or pointed out, that, we're defining industrial off-taker as an ENGA reporting facility. And I suppose in terms of off-takers, it could be multiple industrial facilities that is defined as an ENGA reporting facility. And so I think that's what we would be looking for specifically.
Yeah.
But if you can, whoever this anonymous individual that put this in, can you please submit that question and give us your name and we could contact you and have that a bit more of the conversation, a bit of nuance and context again to unpack, and certainly I would like to understand a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, do you want to unpack grant stacking a little bit?
Oh, yeah, grant stacking. Yeah, that's great.
We've had a few questions that are similar context about can both programs, both low emissions industry grant program and renewable gas production program funding be stacked with other grants like ARENA funding? So the short answer is yes, you can receive grant funding from other sources. However, New South Wales government funding can't be more than 50% of the project. And to ensure the best value for money, the assessment panel will prioritise projects that demonstrate a strong private financial commitment. Projects where the applicant's own investment exceeds the combined state and federal grant funding are viewed as having a more robust risk profile, which will be favourably considered during the portfolio selection process.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, and obviously, all government agencies and grant programs look at, the greater the financial commitment coming from the private sector, the lower the risk, and sort of just kind of getting that optimal distribution of risk. And so our panel will be looking at that very closely, but understanding that some capital contributions from government would be required to move those projects into favorable fit state for your respective executives and boards. So we're trying to sort of finding that, that delicate balancing act in terms of necessity and risk management from our perspective as well. So thanks, Casey.
Thank you. I
appreciate that. Okay. There's a lot of questions here, and a lot of them are answering. So kudos to the team in the green room. And I can see a lot of questions too. We're taking them on notice because lots of nuance and context to unpack. So we'll get back to use those. And also those that were taken on notice will most likely be updating our frequently asked question on the Industrial Decarbonisation Initiative webpage as well. Okay. We did that one. Okay. Is there, this is a good one. Is there a target for how much CO2 is abated per dollar of the grant? In other words, are we looking for a minimum threshold in terms of dollar per ton of CO2 abated? Rich?
I think that one's for me.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly off the top of my head what the exact figure is, but I know that in terms of we have a minimum threshold in terms of how much we want to abate, and we do want to have in terms of the abatement cost per dollar of money that the government puts in, we do want to have that as low as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So we could probably get back to you exactly on the exact figure. But yeah, there's a minimum threshold in terms of what we want to abate, and the lower per dollar per ton, then we will that will probably be scored much more favorably relative to other applications.
Thank you for that. And a good threshold to look at is the average sort of forward spot price, an IQ price or an SNC price that's in the market right now, and you can kind of use that as sort of the baseline to kind of assess what's a reasonable cost of abatement, whether it's over and under, and you kind of assess that. But again, it's all about an argument and a case for the need to funding to move forward abatement, and also to help deploy a technology that perhaps is not quite prolific in the New South Wales market. And so the panel will be looking at things like that. So first of a kind technologies, for example, that could kind of set the stage. You need one of those first movers to go out there, test the technology, deploy it, it's successful, and then all of a sudden, the market kind of rushes in. So we're looking for those types of projects as well. So indeed, we'll be looking at that dollar per ton of carbon abated, but it's not going to be the individual single threshold that we will be looking at to make a final determination on funding. Thanks for that, Richard. Appreciate it.
All right.
Okay. Let's see what we got going here. This is amazing. Thank you so much. These are incredible questions. And again, thank you for the team back in the green room. I don't know why I'm calling it a green room. It's like a comic club.
There may be a question related to sort of aggregated facilities. So whether or not a facility has multiple sites.
Do you want to frame that question for the audience and then have a go at it?
Yeah. So I think there's been some questions in the pre-submitted ones regarding whether or not a facility is maybe under a parent entity which has multiple facilities, and whether or not they can all maybe they're under the ENGA threshold, but collectively they actually meet the ENGA threshold. So even if sort of individual sites are aggregated in a single report and are not listed explicitly, they are still eligible. So we simply require that the parent entity verify the specific baseline emissions for that location, but they must report under ENGAs, and they must report under a mining and manufacturing ANZIT code. So yes, there can be multiple different sites, but packaged up under one parent entity.
No, that's great. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate that. Look, there's a question there that I just want to flag for the audience and the panel as well that I think is quite interesting. Our team, back in the green room, responded to it, and they said, we'll take this one on notice. It's complicated, but I just wanted to say it verbally so everyone in the audience here could sort of, get a feel for this question. Are durable carbon removal projects eligible? And I suspect that is for the low emissions industry program. That's an absolutely interesting question. Certainly we'll take it on notice. But it's certainly something it's something we really want to talk about. We've been fielded from a variety of different queries and questions, particularly about, CCUS and other type of engineered carbon removal solutions. And that is something we want to have a broader discussion about. So please talk to us about that, and we'll unpack those details as part of a kind of a more of a side conversation. But I just wanted to flag that so the rest of the audience could get a flavor of that question and our interest in having that discussion as well. Okay, let's see now. Oh, I've got one here. I've got because I love it when someone gets out of the anonymous sort of, they put their name. So I've got to say, hey, Nick W. out there, thank you for making yourself visible. And this is a good question. Can a behind-the-meter use of the renewable gas qualify under the renewable gas production program? For example, a project that produces renewable gas on site that is used to displace diesel-fired power generation. Now, there's two ways to look at that. One, it definitely eligible for one, but might not necessarily. Well, it might be eligible for one, but definitely not eligible for the other. And you know what I'm talking about, right, Casey? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're talking about the renewable gas production program, they can't be behind the meter projects. So that's not eligible, but
it is eligible for the low emissions.
If you qualify as a manufacturing facility
Yes.
that is an ENGO reporting facility, and that your project could
all
yield
the minimum eligibility requirements.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
We're live here, we don't.
Yeah.
We got to help each other out. Yeah. So Nick, great question. Just to recap, RGPP, no, it's front of the meter. However, if you are eligible manufacturing facility, which is an ENGO reporting facility, and your project has the potential to yield a minimum of 1,000 tons of abatement of emissions reductions per year, you're certainly eligible for that, Nick. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. Oh, here's a good one that we always get. Probably, it's the least technical of requirements that we have, and we certainly look at as part of our merit criteria. What does knowledge sharing involve? Would you like, who wants to take a crack at that one?
Yeah, I can start it off. So knowledge sharing is, really important. We want everyone to benefit from the knowledge that our funding provides for these different facilities. And it can involve just a document that we can share publicly that has some confidential information redacted. It could be talking at a showcase, or
sitting on a panel like
this. It could just be answering some questions for us that we get asked. Can take a number of different forms, but it's just really willingness to share the knowledge that you have gained from undertaking the project.
Yeah. No, thank you, Brigitte. That's really useful information. And just to kind of sort of underscore the importance of this, look, grants, that's the lowest cost of capital you're going to get out there. It beats everything, senior debt, mezzanine debt, concessional loans, whatever you want. It beats it all, right? There's transaction costs to get that money, understand. But all we ask, the public dividend, is to share that knowledge. So it can be disseminated more broadly within New South Wales and Australia, so it can be replicated. And that's all we ask in terms of a public dividend or an interest to that capital that's provided to a successful recipient. Great. Thanks for that question, by the way. We get that question quite often, actually. Let's see now. This is a good one. Anonymous, 7 minutes ago. Will innovative projects be considered using nascent tech? You'll probably have to define that a little bit there, Anonymous, 7 minutes ago. Or just established known brands. Who wants to take a crack at that?
Well, it can be different across the grant programs, but realistically, we're looking for demonstrated proof of technology that has the approvals process clearly laid out and achievable. So nascent technology, if it comes with strong proof and demonstration, it can be a discussion that we have. But if there's not a lot backing it, or there's not a lot of historical use data, it's going to be more difficult to make that decision. Yep.
Right.
And I think just to add to that as well, especially for the low emissions industry program, we're sort of looking for projects that are implementable right now, or as soon as possible before June 2030. So, if it's a new technology, maybe there's a few kinks that need to be worked through first before we get to that stage. Just bear that in mind if you're looking to apply for a project which has that type of technology.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So in terms of technology readiness levels, we're really looking for projects that are ready to go. And certainly we need to unpack that. Please reach out to us if there's a specific technology you'd like to discuss. But, a good example for the RGPP is, if you've got an 80 unit ready to go that could yield, a significant production volumes in a short amount of time. That's what we're going to be looking at. And competitively, that's what's going to win. We're not saying that developing innovative technologies. If you heard my panel discussion a few weeks ago at the Renewable Fuels Conference, we talked about innovation, how important that is. Certainly, we have programs that will be supporting that. we're likely to be launching new grant programs that targets the commercialization of those innovative technologies at some point in the future. So I would look out for those particular grants, to support those types of technologies. But happy to go through the details of that of what you're thinking in terms of technologies. Thank you. All right, so we've got about 16 minutes left. I'll field a few more questions here. Oh, thank you for. Oh, let me just. A lot of questions here, and a lot of them are getting answered. Okay. My apologies here. I'm a bit of a lull here.
Are any of the answered questions worthwhile discussing?
Yeah, I've been looking at those. They did a pretty good job at, yeah.
Thanks, Green Room team.
I have one here. I've got one from Paul, again, another one that, Paul, thank you for not being anonymous. Just to clarify, projects must or should, ? Start within 6 months of notification. Projects must be operational by June 2030. So I'm assuming start within 6 months of notification. So yeah, projects must be commissioned and operational by June 2030.
Yes.
For both of the grants. Paul, thank you for that.
I think with the within 6 months of notification, that might be related to the 2 to 6 months after the letter of notice. That's just us factoring in a bit of a contract negotiation period.
Right.
So that number is, that time frame is subject to change relative to how complex the negotiations are. It could also be shorter. So I think letter of notice is in November 2026. We could theoretically, for LEAP, we could theoretically start projects in December if negotiations happen very, very smoothly.
But June 2030 is a hard and fast date.
Operational by June 2030, that's an absolute must.
And that's for both programs.
Both programs, I hope that's clear, Paul. Thank you for the question. Thank you, panel. My apologies. Okay. I've got one from Clive here. This is a good one. One for the Renewable Gas Production Program. Clive, thank you very much for the question. What feedstocks are eligible? Agricultural waste, energy crops, sugarcane residue, municipal waste, etc., etc. Are purpose-grown energy crops eligible under sustainability criteria? Ooh, could be a tough one.
That's a tricky one.
Are integrated biorefinery systems producing biomethane plus other outputs, such as SAF or bio-CO2?
Oh, SAF.
Yeah. No, that's a good one, Clive. Certainly, look, there's a variety of different feedstocks that are available. Again, and under the RGGO, there's certain criteria, the sustainability criteria that needs to be met to be eligible for those certificates. So I would encourage you to look at those. In terms of producing, other outputs, certainly, biogenic CO2 is and digest it, for example. Certainly important outputs that kind of fatten that revenue stack for these projects. Certainly that's part of it. So certainly we'd be looking at that. And I think, we've heard from a few in the industry that perhaps biogenic CO2 will even have more value than the actual gas molecule being created as part of these schemes. So yeah, certainly there's a big question here, Clive. The best thing to do is please submit your question in the inbox, but certainly just at a high level, it's looking at all feedstock. There's sustainability criterion spelt out in the RGGOs, and certainly we're looking at all revenue streams for these particular projects. Thanks, Clive. Okay. This is a good one. We get this question all the time, Anonymous. All right. Once, Anonymous 18 minutes ago, if this is your question, once funding is approved, will it be provided up front at different stage gates or at the delivery of the project? This is the sequence and cycle of funding throughout our contracts. Who wants to take that?
Yeah, sure. So, we generally follow a milestone-based funding scheme. So there may be a little bit of funding tied for contract sign, and there'll be a few stage gates in between, and potentially a milestone at the end for once your operational commission, and maybe even proved a year's worth of abatement. So that's at least my perspective from sort of the low emissions industry program.
And the renewable gas production program is targeting 4 milestone payments. That's what I think you.
So four is the standard.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for that. Yeah, so if you look at the funding agreements, like Merchant Cases pointed out, it's structured at 4. Certainly, that's subject to negotiations and the type of project. But there's a variety of different blends of financing that we could, or sequence of financing that could be negotiated. Upfront payments are not unusual. They just need to be tied to specific deliverables. Typically, we look at things like, the completion of front-end engineering design, for example, final investment decisions, getting those, strategic, those commitments from strategic partnerships, finalized, all that kind of stuff. So it is kind of a stage gate approach at the front end. We can provide payment for those things, but they need to be tied to very explicit deliverables. So hopefully that answers your questions, and certainly that's all subject to negotiations if indeed you're one of the successful recipients as part of this grant program. All right, I just got a text message from my colleague back in the green room. I think this is your question, Clyde, around the and so that's correct. So in terms of meeting that sustainability criterion, you need to be eligible. You need to comply with RGGO, which has those criteria. So I just wanted to point that out and reconfirm that as well.
Yeah. Links to the RGGO requirements can be found in the RGPP, the Renewable Gas Production Program guidelines.
Okay, great.
As well as you can just go to the Green Power website.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. Have a conversation. We're buddies with all the Green Power team here, so happy to have that conversation with them as well. Okay, we've got how are we doing? We've got 8 minutes. Does that give me enough time to sort of summarize, or could we go through a couple more questions here?
Probably do 1 or 2 more questions.
1 or 2 more? Okay, cool. These are great questions, by the way, audience. Thank you so much. This is awesome. Really excited about this. All right. Oh, this is a good one. Are projects... Oh, this is a tough one. Oh, okay. What is the best way to contact? This is an easy one. What is the best way to contact me or contact us if we have further questions? You can contact us. We have a mailbox, an inbox, emissions reduction at environment.nsw.gov.au. I think all that information is just go to our Industrial Decarbonisation Initiative website, and you will see all the links where you can contact us, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where you can contact us, anonymous 5 minutes ago. All right. This is an interesting one. Are projects required to maintain production levels? This is a big open question. And so when you think about it, we're funding abatement. So certainly abatement is tied to production. So who would like to, and the same thing goes for RGPP. We're funding, a gigajoule of gas produced. And so who wants to?
Yeah, if we're talking about the RGPP and production levels of a facility, so we can either be talking about the off-taker, the industrial off-taker, or the biomethane production facility, in which case the answer would be the biomethane production facility has to maintain its production at that 0.1 petajoules per year.
That's right. Yeah. And so, and obviously there's going to be, we're looking at averages here. Certainly you don't maintain constant production levels throughout the life of a project. Yeah. There's, maintenance, there's all these kind of things that might happen. Certainly, and those are usually kind of negotiated contractually. And so those details will be ironed out at the contractual stage, but certainly we're looking at averages. Same thing for abatement projects. In many cases, we're looking at averages. It's tied to production levels, whatever you're producing as a manufacturing facility or a mining facility. But all of these kind of specific metrics are negotiated within the contract, but typically we're looking at average production rates.
You can't just
shut down the facility.
Shut down the facility to reduce your emission like that.
We're paying for abatement and we're paying for the molecule for RGPP. So just think of that within that context. All right. Great. Good question. We get this a lot. Okay, well, look, I mean, we've got 6 minutes left. There's a lot of questions that have been posted. Oh, this is a good one. We mentioned it earlier, but this is a good one. This is in our funding guidelines and our eligibility criteria, I think. Are feasibility studies or pilots eligible? These are two separate things. Let's tackle them separately. Let's look at feasibility study. Panel?
No for both.
Yeah, no for both in terms of feasibility studies. For LEAP, let's say you do a pilot and it does reduce emissions by 1,000 tons, then that per year, then that is potentially eligible as long as you meet every other eligibility requirement. But again, this will all be assessed competitively against other projects which may reduce emissions by a lot, potentially by a much larger size. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah, again, thank you, Reg. So just to underscore, feasibility studies, no, for both projects. Keep looking. But to keep in mind, the pilot, obviously, if you meet the minimum threshold, again, the panel is going to be looking at technologies also that have the potential to scale in the future, but also looking at technologies that can make a huge impact in the market. And so think about it that way. So if you meet the eligibility criteria, certainly you can submit an application, but whether or not they will stack up competitively against other applications and projects, that remains to be seen. But happy to unpack that project in a little bit more detail at some point. Okay, well, we covered a lot, I think. A lot of ground we covered. Thank you, panel. I think we've got about 4 minutes left. And I should go over a few tips for success. And so, look, I mean, these are quite obvious, and a lot of you have been through these processes before, but this is just to help you, put your best foot forward to submit a very, strong, robust, and quality application. And whether it's for the Low Emissions Industry Program or the RGPP. And so if you have project-specific questions, you could reach out to us at emissionsreduction@environment.nsw.gov.au at our mailbox. Please keep in mind when applying for grant funding, a big tip for success is frame the project that suits the merit criteria. It's an obvious thing, but you'd be surprised on how many applications we get that kind of deviate from that. We want to know how it stacks up with the very specific merit criteria that we have in the funding guidelines. That is the most important critical factor that we look at. Introductions are great. Stories are great. We absolutely want the context and the background, but we are assessing merit criteria, folks, and that's how we're going to assess your applications competitively against other project applicants as well. We acknowledge, like I think we pointed this out earlier, that we do ask for a lot of evidence. We apologize up front, but the panel needs that information to make an informed decision. And so please make sure you provide the required information. There'll be less back and forth, and we could, we can progress the application process and the approval process a little bit quicker. Lastly, and this is sort of for all you procrastinators out there, including myself, give yourself some ample time to make the application deadline. We get a lot of requests to submit late applications, and certainly context matters in these circumstances. But we're pretty firm on those deadlines because, we got to treat everyone fairly. And so it's always stressful to see that looming application, a deadline in the horizon. So again, make sure you're well prepared. Read the funding guidelines. If you have any questions, come and talk to us, and we'll be happy to have a conversation with you to address any questions that you may have. Any other tips for success that comes to mind?
I think there was one extra, which might be we have a lot of required evidence, but we also have a decent amount of optional evidence.
Yeah.
It's optional, but if you do have that information, it's definitely worth providing as well.
Yep. Great.
And you can go in and start an application and have a look what it looks like.
Yeah.
You don't have to start and submit within, a few minutes.
That's a good point. Just load up, provide your details, see what it looks like, and you don't need to submit. That's a really good piece of advice, Brigitte. And so head to our Industrial Decarbonisation Initiative to see all the details associated with these grants and the application requirements. Again, you can scan the QR code that you see right in front of you. And follow the link. It'll take you straight there. Use our mailbox again for any questions that you may have. Just a reminder that the Renewable Gas Production Program, EOI, closes, the expression of interest, stage 1, closes at 11 p.m. on April 24th this year, 2026. And the Low Emissions Industry Program closes at 11 p.m. On June 9th, 2026, this year as well. So that's all we have for you today. And thank you very much for participating and joining us today. Hopefully, we're really excited to see some really quality applications come our way. Again, I'm Eric Kimmel. Thank you very much, panel, Brigitte, Richard, and Casey. And hopefully we'll talk to you all very soon. Have a wonderful day. See ya.